Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum people. It's your boy Moss here for another episode of the Scholar and the Student podcast, season 2, episode number 2. Let me just bring up the profile picture of our esteemed guest today. All the way, well, right now he's in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. But he grew up not very far from where we are in the dusty roads of Mulepulule. This is our friend, our brother, Dominic Fwamba, all the way from Tanzania. He is the head of TCRO, and I'm going to keep that a bit of a secret as to what exactly TCRO is. I'll let him take it away in regards to what exactly that stands for. He's also an entrepreneur and a freelance writer on the side. But just to bring him to my side on the video feed right now, Dominic, welcome to Botswana virtually. I know you've been here plenty of times, you grew up here, but it's nice to host you in my house virtually thanks to this pandemic. How are you doing this morning, brother?
I'm doing good, Mr. Kim. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and just share with your listeners about experiences in general.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, talking about experiences, let's start with yourself, Dominic. As I've already said, you grew up on the dusty alleyways of Mulepulule, if I can call them that. How did you end up in a place like Moleps? Because, well, for better or for worse, that place kind of has a reputation. You can elaborate more on that. And how did you end up in Tanzania? How did you get, well, what were the factors that led to your exodus to Dar es Salaam, as you so pleasantly like to call it?
Oh man, I think Mulepulele has only now gotten a reputation in the last maybe 6, 7 years, because if you've been in Moleps for any length of time, the proximity to the city has made it such that it's become such a popular commuting destination for people who are trying to avoid the high costs of living in Gabs. So I think with a lot of new people flooding to Moleps because it's like what, a 40-minute drive from Gabs. Um, I think now like all those new dynamics, new people from different places, that's what's given it a reputation. But I digress there. How I ended up in Moleps, right? So my mom, you know, when I first moved to Botswana, actually, the place where we first moved to was Atisha, you know. It's a small little town, I think about, what, 70 kilometers from
Yeah,
Muchudi or something.
yeah.
So that's where we lived for about a year or a year and a half. That's where my mom was first stationed.
Hmm.
Um, she worked for the Katling District Council at the time. And we moved to Moleps in 97, I think it should be, when she got a job with the Ministry of Education. So they took her
Wow,
there to
wow.
Scottish Livingston
Mm.
Hospital. So that's how I
Mm.
ended up there. I pretty much started school there. I went to Botswana when I was very young. I was about 5 years old. So when we moved from my home country to Botswana, I had to start everything all over again. So I started
Mm.
school at Al Haq
Ah,
Secondary School. It's an
yes.
Islamic school
Yes.
um, in Moleps, and went to Shepherd English Medium School to finish off my primary. And then I did my junior in Masilo, in Moleps as well, and then I finished my senior in Liduma. So I'm pretty much like bred in Botswana, boy.
Absolutely. And you've got quite a diverse portfolio of education because, I mean, mine is pretty boring. It's just private school from beginning to end. But you've been like everywhere, Islamic school, government school, and English medium. So if I can just make you digress a little bit, how was that experience? Was there anything significant in the approaches of these schools, or was it pretty much the same all over?
Oh man, I think it's so different. I think for me, because most of my childhood memories are at
Hmm.
Hak, the
Hmm.
best years. I'm talking like standard one. I was in a Hak from from preschool to standard four. So that's those 4 years. Those are really heyday years for a young person, and, meeting friends and stuff. I started moving, I moved to Shepherd's English Medium School when kids started being mean,
I see.
I think when you reach
I see.
standard 5, 6, 7, I think kids start being really conscious of themselves and stuff. So those heyday and happy years were at our hack. But I think very different approaches, I think our hack is an Islamic faith foundation school, but I don't think that's how they necessarily push the narrative. It feels just like, a normal school,
Absolutely.
I think the only differences we would see is that maybe some students will go and do madrasa, versus at Shepherd English Medium School where that didn't really just exist,
Yeah.
But what I do remember is that our hack had a lot more core curricular activities than Shepherd English Medium School. I mean, for the time that I moved there. But long and short of it is that I think it's really, really, they just had different philosophies and different ways in which they were. But I think where I really started to see the difference in the way things are was when I went to junior school at Masilo, You see, Masilo is like right in Lekwaping, which is like at the furthest end of Lekwaping. It's basically within shrubs. So it's as rural a school as you can think of.
Wow.
And
Wow.
yeah, the approach there was a very closed system, very closed system. It wasn't just an enabling environment for the most part,
I see.
Private schools tend to be very enabling environment, encouraging environments. But listen, I still look back at Masilo nostalgically, but yeah, it was very different, It didn't, the philosophy was a little bit more, harsh than, my primary school years. So yeah, very different philosophies of education.
Excellent.
Actually.
But somewhere along the line, you got into debating and public speaking. If you could tell us more about that and how that led to you forming TCRO. What the hell is TCRO is what the viewers are asking right now. Spoiler alert, it's got something to do with Tanzania, but I'll let you do the honors of elucidating on your organization.
So when I went, credit where it's due, Masilo Junior Secondary School, with all the smack that I give that school, one thing that I do credit it for is allowing or introducing me to debating, and it was a very lively debate school, if I should say, with a very supportive, with very selectively supportive teachers to the craft, So that's where I was introduced to debate. But I think for me, debate has always been a part of my secondary life. Like all my friends were debaters, more or less. So for me, it just became like going to school pretty much, like school wasn't school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It was just like another subject, but my favorite subject, the one that I enjoyed. So listen, I finished my secondary school and, of course I moved on to other things. But, it's only like how many years later after leaving secondary school, like 7 years later where I moved to Tanzania and, I started TCRO, So TCRO stands for Tanzania Competitive Rhetoric Organization. And I know that sounds like a mouthful. So I'm going to say it a little slowly. Tanzania Competitive Rhetoric Organization. We initially wanted to just call it Tanzania Debate Union, to be honest. It would have been a more approachable name. But TCRO, as the acronym goes, has become synonymous with debating here in Tanzania. So it sort of worked out, in that way, only because I think with kids, they will always find a way, to make something complicated simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, it's a very personal story growing up in Botswana where they have a very vibrant debating culture and traveling, in in secondary school, traveling to different countries, to different provinces, interacting with international communities and not seeing Tanzanian students at international tournaments. That's actually what pushed me to start TCRO, because I've always made the argument that one of the strengths that has kept debating going in most countries where it's got such a strong foothold, like Botswana, are some of those, people like you from Debaters Without Borders, before you guys, there were people like Justice Motlhabane who were external influencers, enablers, who gave those young people safe spaces. So, the idea really was to replicate that here in Tanzania. And that's how TCRO started, that's really just the ethos of the organization, and the brain behind it, so
I
to
mean,
speak.
absolutely. You mentioned Justice. Justice is Justice Mutlabani. Besides, I mean, everyone in Botswana knows him because he was on Big Brother. But besides that, he's quite an integral player in my story as well when it comes to debate, because I explicitly remember him coming to my school, which was Kaswe. I mean, I only went to basically three schools in my life. That's nursery, primary, and high school. I wasn't let's say, a tourist such as yourself, for better or for worse. So I remember when Justice Motlabani came to my school and then he taught us about this new system of debate, because back in the day we used to have the boring one. You remember long man style, where you got four speakers, they define, there's no like argumentation in that sense, because people are just sticking to their scripts and playing it very safe. And then Justice came with this new revolutionary thing. But at the time, I remember not being too interested in it. But later, like 2012, when I was doing my Form 6, lower 6, that's AS level, if you will, and there was a competition in Radisile, of all places. So, I mean, interesting, but yeah, Radisile, we were there, and it was actually the national selections. I mean, okay, you see, the thing about Botswana competitions is that the competition will be called something, but then what that actually means will be something else. So they selected the best 20 speakers in the country, and then from that 20, they were going to make further selections for people who would be on the national team for debate for Botswana in like 2012 or 2013. And I managed to become the vice captain of that team with the likes of people such as you've heard of Tawanda Mulalu and Israel Walter Chona III. He's also a founding member of Debaters Without Borders. So yes, definitely Justice was part of our foundation. He was part of our stepping stone. So it's interesting to see how he was part of your story as well. But if I may ask, Dominic, why debate? Because yes, I'm sure that you've already elucidated on your personal journey and all that stuff. And even for myself, people would ask, what sport do you play? I'm like, debate, because debating is a sport. I mean, not everyone's good at it. And just to self-promote myself, from the years 2009 until 2013, which is when I started debating in Kaswe and Form 2 until my final year in Kaswe, I was the best debater. Well, I was crowned best debater in school all those years. So there's something to look forward to. But why debate to develop the young people? Because I can say from personal experience, even being on a national team, when you go for like sponsorships to big companies such as, Mascom and Orange, they're not interested in sponsoring your team unless it's football or something of that sort. So people don't have that importance of debate. So why did you go to such lengths to promote something which is just, in many ways, it's an uphill battle for you? Why choose debate instead of something else to develop the youth?
So for me, I think, and I was saying this to my students just the other day, I was training a new school, and I hope they also had their justice moment, like you were
Yeah,
describing. So it's a new
yeah.
school under my table, and it's like I said to them the other day. I said, debating is a life skill, you know. It's a life skill. It's a life skill because it I think once you engage at the level that is required for that World Schools debate and British parliamentary debate require our students to rise up to, I think everything else sort of feels easier,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
So it's an elevated skill set. That's one thing I would like to say. But more than that, it gives you a life skill, because everything else that has to deal with public speaking or being grilled or being asked difficult questions or being put in a position where you have to think on the spot, like an interview or even just a televised interview or a radio interview, whatever type of situation where you have to be on a platform, just becomes easier after that, you know? So it's an elevated form of art, which which I think really just makes you equipped for life, you know, or certain situations in life, not for life entirely, but just those particular types of situations, which a lot of people struggle with, if we're to be honest,
Absolutely.
right? A lot of people
Absolutely.
struggle to communicate themselves effectively, to communicate what they represent effectively. So, you know, debate is that bridging gap. It helps, you know, bridge that ability and inability. I think the heart of debate for me is where it mostly lies than you know, the commercial part of it, because like you're saying, debate is a very difficult sport to sell. It's not recognized. People would rather, they don't actually, people actually don't even look at it as a sport, you know. You are better off finding chess sponsorship than you are for finding sponsorship for a debate team, you know. Because I think it touches on a skill that, or on an ability that most people tend to have, which is speaking. So I think there are some people whom, if they have not been a part of the system, they just don't see the use for it. But to be honest, I don't think anything that is easy is worth doing anyway. You know, if you go for something, everything that is easy to get sponsorship for has already been done, you know, by somebody else. You know, it's not. I think the feat of it comes where you get recognition for something that's not particularly easy to do. But I don't think I really thought about it in those terms when I started TCRO. You know, it's been an uphill climb, like you say. It's not easy to convince. I mean, we've been in the game now for like 5 years. In fact, 5 years as of
Wow.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
5 years
Yeah.
as of yesterday. Like, we've been registered now for 5 years, but we haven't gotten any like core sponsorship. Like, when I say, or core funding, let me say, you know, to support our programs, you know, from some donor organization. We are an NGO after all, but we haven't gotten any type of core funding in 5 years of being in the game. We only get program funding. But I think that in itself has been I think it's been an achievement in itself. Because right now, I can at least say we have 2 or 3 donors who we can approach at any given event, and we're assured that they will sponsor us. So at least we've reached to that stage. But I think for me, you know, just to answer your question more directly, it's about the life skill. I think it's a life skill everybody should have, and I think more than just talking yourself out of a difficult situation. I think we're living in a world where the conversations that are being had, the questions that are being asked, are not intuitive enough. They are not. We're not having quality conversations because people don't have a background in critical thinking, and they don't have a background in effective communication, you know? And I think this really reduces and waters down the types of interactions that we have and quality of conversations that we have in our communities and in our societies in general. So I think debating, you know, in many ways, improves those conversations, you know, in many ways. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can relate to what you're saying because not too long ago, I was attending a webinar because everything's online now. It was to do with ADR. And for those of you who don't know, ADR refers to alternative dispute resolution. And it's a trending topic somewhat, you can say, in the legal world right now because people don't want to go to court increasingly. That's just a lot of time wasted. It's a lot of cash that you could have used for doing something else. So ADR is the new thing where you get a mediator, for example, and you sit the parties down and you try to get them to settle the thing without going to court. And there was some lady there who had an LLM in something, a Master's of Law. I've only got a bachelor's in law. Well, hopefully, I'm waiting for my last batch of results. And yes, she had interesting things to say, but damn, I was falling asleep during her presentation because she wasn't selling her content to me as someone who is interested in this subject, who wants to take it up as a profession, who wants to perhaps pioneer ADR institutions in Botswana, for example. But still, the stuff that she was saying, I wasn't convinced, not because she was wrong, but mostly because she didn't have presentation and all those other things that we could give a long lecture about. I mean, you wouldn't have liked it either if you were there. I mean, we have those debating marking sheets. You would have gotten the lowest possible score, if I can put it that way. Because it's not just about what you have to say, it's how you say it. And whether that's correct in your approach or not, the thing is that people are people with limited attention spans. So if you're not selling them what you have to say, then they're not going to eat it up. And I like what you brought up about the critical conversations because, look, maybe your job will not entail you having to speak out in public all the time, but critical thinking is a life skill, whether people acknowledge it or not. And you rightly pointed out that we're not having quality conversations. And interestingly enough, that the episode before this, I was interviewing an imam from Canada. His name was Sheikh Madhar Mahmoud, and he was talking about how within Islamic circles, the clergy, instead of engaging in critical thought and evaluating perhaps rulings which people came up with hundreds of years ago, and instead of reevaluating those issues for today's time, they just parrot out the rulings that we've derived from these books, which were tailored for situations from before any of us were born. So he was, I don't want to use the word despondent, but he did imply that everyone in this world, regardless of which field they're in, needs to have that element of critical thinking so they can push the boundaries. And it sounds so cliche, but make this world a better place. You know, tailor what you have, make those, bring them out in a palatable form for people of today and make it entertaining, make it palatable, basically. And yes, present your craft to the world, if I'm making sense. I don't know if you have anything to add up on that.
Yeah, I think effective communication, because the way I always market debating to corporates and to laymen, you know, is effective communication. For you to be able to convey your message to your employees, for you to be able to convey your message to your co-workers, for you to be able to convey your message to your kids, for you to be able to be a mouthpiece, you know? Because here's the thing, here's the weird part. People always are critical about debaters and debating and, you know, almost put it as an aside. But it's always ironic that whenever you're around people, and I don't know if this happens to you too, Master, where when you're around people who know that you're a debater and they need anything said, you know, whether it's in the workplace or in that type of environment, they'll be like, hey, Master, you're our guy. Because they know you are going to communicate what they're thinking. You're going to communicate what they represent most effectively. That is a life skill. That is the definition of a life skill right there. And I think just it has a trickle down effect on so many things because, like you're saying, people just can't. Like if let's take it that that lady was giving that exciting lecture to a student who are still in the fence about whether they want to study law or not, you know, and they gave like a whole profile that, you know, she's been in the legal practice for 15 years or 20 years and, you know, she's pioneered this amazing thing. And the way that she was communicating, just because, you know, did not sell you to what she was saying. It's very difficult, you see, for you to convince, say, you know, someone who is considering the legal profession, you know, that this is something that they should actually do and they should actually take seriously from then on out. So I think it's really, really, you know, underrated, but it's a really important skill to have.
Absolutely. And yeah, talking about my personal experiences, usually I'm the guy who's always called up to do emceeing at any event. And yeah, sometimes even give lectures at the mosque and stuff like that, even though I'm definitely not an imam. I'm not qualified in the sacred sciences by any stretch of the imagination. But absolutely, you nailed it on the head that because people know that we have this reputation, if you will, of communicating ideas effectively, and they know that we'll be the ones who will be able to sell whatever it is they're trying to sell, and we'll be the ones to bring people to our side with a bit of charisma, even, then we are usually the ones who are scouted out for the job. And in many ways, that is also why I started this podcast to have dialogues. Now, I'm going to bring this into an interesting tangent. Would you say that dialogue would be a more conducive activity to undertake for people looking to build bridges than debate? Because when you say debate, it's kind of a loaded term. People think, oh, there's going to be an auditorium, people are going to be aggressive. When he makes a comeback, everyone's going to go, oh, and all that kind of stuff. As opposed to a dialogue, which we're kind of having now, although we're not going at each other's heads because we're pretty much agreeing on most of the things we're talking about. But let's say, for example, we came to different standpoints about a certain topic, we'd still be able to bring it forward in a very respectable manner. So you would say, I believe in this because of ABC, and I would say, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to digress because of X, Y, and Z. Because, yes, debate is kind of a loaded term in that sense, but at the core of it, I would say that even if you're having a dialogue, the same skills are being exercised. Yes, it's not like your World Schools debate competition where people have been given protected time or they can give rebuttals and POIs like that. But at the heart of it, we're still having an organic conversation. We're not being forced to change our opinion just because someone else says something. We are sticking to our guns, sticking to our opinions, but justifying them in a manner that's palatable to the other side. So would you say dialogue is the more viable option in practical situations? Not talking about kids now, but let's say with world leaders and politics, for example, that they should prioritize dialogue over debate.
So here's the thing that I always, it's a very interesting question, by the way, but here's the thing that I always try to teach my students I always try not to ostracize certain terms away from each other. Because the way I look at it, I look at debate as a form of dialogue. You see, I think a lot of people don't think about it in that way, you know, in the same way that people don't look at debate as a form of public speaking, right? So whenever it is that I want to bring an affinity towards a certain type of idea, I always like to help people think about it a little bit differently than the way they have. Because here's the thing, you rightfully point out that there is sort of like a stigma or stereotype that is associated with the word debate from a layman's term that seems to say argument, that seems to say disagreement, you know, that seems to say non-consensus, you know. However, I think that only for the untrained public would debate be seen as a non-consensus type of activity because they have not been trained in the etiquette of debating and in the etiquette of receiving, accepting, conceding to opinions that they might not necessarily agree with. I think this is the unique skill about debating, you see. Debate makes debaters aware that, listen, you might not win all the battles. Not everybody will agree with you. And I think this is a lesson that in our dialogues, however way we want to look at them, we need to incorporate because that is the unique thing, the unique value proposition in dialogue that debate has. The fact that there's an appreciation of opinions that we might not necessarily be accustomed to. How many times have you, in a debate, maybe as a Muslim man, been forced to defend Western liberal ideologies? What that does is that it makes you understand a perspective. You don't necessarily have to agree with the opinion, but you at least need to understand it from that perspective. This is the unique selling point for debating. And I definitely think that the way to think about this is that if we teach debate as a form of dialogue, right, and not as a form of, as an art where, people look at it in those layman's term of, disagreement or dispute resolution per se, I think it becomes a little bit more meaningful for how people come to look at this, because a lot of, here's the thing, not every topic that, because here's the thing about the word dialogue when it's looked at individually, it almost always seems to come to insinuate that people are going to come to an agreement. Yeah. But there are things that some people will just never come to an agreement about. It might be because of creed, it might be because of a deep-seated belief or a personal experience or a lived experience, you see. But it's important for that conversation to be had, you see, which is where I feel like those, for me, dialogue and debate are not mutually exclusive. And this is why, for me, I always teach them as one thing as a form of another.
Absolutely. I mean, you hit it right on the head
Absolutely. I mean,
there.
you hit it
These
right on the head there.
skills
These
are interchangeable,
skills
and
are
there's no
interchangeable,
use
and
getting
there's
into
no
a
use getting
semantic sort of
into a semantic
debate
sort of
about what
debate
exactly one
about
means and
what
what the
exactly
other
one
doesn't
means
mean and
and
all
what
those
the
kind
other
of things,
doesn't
because at
mean
the
and
end
all
of the
those
day,
kind of
we
things,
are
because at
trying
the
to
end of the
teach
day,
kids to
we
be
are
critical
trying to teach
thinkers,
kids
to
to
be
be
able
critical
to come up with
thinkers, to be
arguments to
able to
justify
come up
their
with
positions,
arguments to justify
and
their
later on in
positions.
life, they can of
And
course
later on
apply
in
these
life,
to their
they can, of
personal
course, apply
opinions,
these
whatever
to
they
their
may be,
personal
however
opinions, whatever they may
radical,
be,
liberal
however
they may be.
radical,
Right,
liberal
so I
they
think
may
we've
be.
had such
Right, so I
an
think we've
interesting
had
conversation
such
on this
an
topic
interesting
of debate,
conversation
and
on this
for those
topic
of
of
you who may
debate.
not
And
know,
for those of you who may
I
not
don't know
know,
why you don't know,
I
but
don't
I
know
am the
why you
legal
don't know,
advisor
but
for
I am the
Debaters
legal
Without Borders,
advisor
which
for
is
Debaters
at the
Without
moment
Borders,
it's an
which is
NGO.
at the moment it's an
We might change
NGO.
our spoiler
We
alert. We
might
might change
change
our
our spoiler
status in
alert. We might
terms of
change our
how
status in
our
terms
structure
of
is and all that kind
how
of
our
stuff. But
structure
at
is
the
and all
moment
that
we're an
kind of stuff.
NGO
But
in
at the moment
Botswana,
we're an NGO
and
in
we deal
Botswana,
with
and
competitions
we deal
relating to
with
debate, training
competitions relating to
kids, training
debate,
teachers how
training
to
kids,
be
training
judges
teachers how to
or
be
adjudicators
judges
of
or
debate and
adjudicators
all
of
that kind of
debate
stuff. But
and all
unfortunately,
that kind
this
of
year
stuff. But
there's been
unfortunately,
a
this year,
drought in events
there's been a
because of
drought in events
the
because
global
of
pandemic
the
that's
global
going
pandemic
on in the
that's
world.
going
I don't know how
on
it's
in the
been in
world.
your
I
side,
don't know
Dominic,
how it's
because
been
I
in
did see
your
that you
side,
guys
Dominic,
did
because I did see that you guys
manage
did
to hold
manage to
a virtual
hold
tournament.
a
So could you
virtual
tell us more
tournament.
about how
So could
this
you
year
tell
has
us more
affected
about how this year has
TCRO and
affected
debating in Tanzania in
TCRO and
general,
debating in
and
Tanzania in
how
general,
that
and
virtual tournament
how that
actually went?
virtual
What did you
tournament
guys actually
actually
do
went?
to,
What did you guys
on your
actually
side,
do
to make sure that
on
the
your
thing went
side to
smoothly
make sure
without
that
any
the thing
hiccups,
went
without
smoothly without
someone
any hiccups,
getting cut
without
off in the middle of
someone
their speech
getting
and
cut off in the
having to
middle of their
lose
speech
by
and having to
default because
lose
they didn't
by
finish their speech
default
because of a
because they didn't
bad
finish their
internet
speech
connection and
because of
all
a
those kind
bad
of
internet
weird things that
connection and all
happen?
those kind of weird things that happen.
Yeah, you rightfully put it. This year has been a drought in events. I think um, debate and debate tournaments and events in general, because debate tournaments are events. Events and the coronavirus, they do not mix. It's like worlds apart and everything. So it's been a drought in events. So we had to think very early about how we could possibly have alternative forms of engagement. And yeah, we did think about or put in the work for having an online tournament. We had two, in fact. We had the Corona Open. It was called the Corona Open, quite fittingly, and the Corona Open 2.0. So we had those events, and it was very interesting to see. For me, what really touched me about those events was the passion our students have to, transcend this pandemic, and still show their passionate or their passion in their living room, So it was amazing. It was a very new territory for us. I've always been resistant to technology as a means of interaction, because I never felt the they could speak, or they could help someone, or they could allow someone to be as expressive as they were with human to human interaction. But I think it's been a cultural revolution for me as a leader, to just understand that technology is a bridging gap, and not a hindering tool, like I had been thinking about it. So it broke down barriers for me. But just for the nitty-gritties of it and like the technicalities, I mean, we did have rules about how, what, this is the internet. You and I could be chatting just now, and the internet could, or like there could be a power cut, or like a tower could go down. It's the internet. It's not a fixed structure. Anything can happen. It's very dynamic every second. So we understood that, and would always advise students to say, if you're using your Wi-Fi, make sure that you've got data loaded on your phone, and would give them a sufficient amount of time, about 5 minutes, to make sure that they get back on the call. Fortunately for us here in Tanzania, data is not as expensive as other parts of the world. So students had that option of, say, if they were using the Wi-Fi and they had a power cut at home, they could switch to their mobile phones and continue their speech from there, So fortunately for us, we had that type of arrangement. But I mean, there were ways around those technical glitches, so to speak. But we had a very successful first and second edition of the tournament. And it's opened up for me the possibilities that exist, for, excuse me, bro, for this type of events, online events, as a way. I think with the breaking down, or with the normalization, I don't think virtual tournaments will continue being a thing. However, what I do think is that it's a form of it's a very good alternative to reaching more people with training. That for me was the holy grail for this whole thing. It was the aha moment of saying, there are people I've always wanted to reach in different parts of the country, right? But I have not been able to, because I just didn't have either resources and all of that stuff. So it's a really interesting way to reach people and spread the debate gospel, if you will.
Absolutely. And as a little side point before we progress further, was your aversion to technology, did it have anything to do with the presence of trolls online and the way people handle debate on Twitter? Because that's more of an emotional breakdown 90% of the time than an actual debate where people put themselves across. Or even people who make those videos online, usually it's just a rant about, oh, you're so stupid, blah, 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 instead of actually bringing the other person's argument down, and it's all about, you're a liberal SJW snowflake who can't take criticism, and you know what I'm saying. Was that something that deterred you from online platforms for debate for a long time?
To be honest, it never occurred to me, that trolling, like, because debates are so systematic and structured. I don't think that occurred to me. For me, why I was not sold to the fact that debating could happen, in like virtually, is mostly because of the engagement, But I have found that there are apps like Zoom, like Skype, for instance, where, they basically replicate a real world environment. You know what I mean? That's like, just basically, they replicate a real world environment where people can engage and give each other points of information virtually, in the same way that you and I are discussing and having this conversation right now. So that was really, for me, my biggest. I was like, is it even a debate if you can't engage? How do you give points of information? But all of those things have been solved with some of the virtual solutions that have, come up. And yeah, for me, that for me was my main thing, because I tend to be a little bit too much of a purist about the way that I think about debating, and what debating is, so to speak.
Absolutely. And why I asked you about the Well, the aptly named Corona Open and the Corona Open 2.0, if I was monetized, I would so be demonetized right now. But anyway, because, hey, interesting fact, on YouTube, you're not allowed to say the word coronavirus because if you do, you get demonetized. Even if you're making a scientific video about what exactly is a coronavirus, because it's an umbrella term, it's not just a reference to one virus. But even if you say coronavirus once in your video, you get demonetized, all right? But anyway, coming back to the actual point, you see, reason why I was asking is that we at DWB right now, by the time this is released, I don't know if we would have been successful in doing this. Are also planning to have a virtual tournament of sorts because our main event, ASDC, All Schools Debating Championship, did not happen this year for obvious reasons because you cannot congregate in places and so on and so forth, at least in numbers more than 50, and then there's still social distancing, so this just puts everything out of balance. You've been to Botswana and you continue coming here on a regular basis. Hopefully, by the time December rolls around, you'll also be able to come. So travel restrictions, we hope, will be lifted by then. But the thing I'm getting at is that you have an experience with internet in Botswana. And to quote you from our previous conversations, if you don't have Wi-Fi at home in Botswana, then you're probably hopeless in a situation such as this, such as an online debate tournament.
Yeah, I think in many ways, I think the problem with internet in Botswana, in my opinion, is more of a legislative one than it is one of infrastructure or anything like that, right? I think the government of Botswana, in my opinion, has not done enough to bridge the digital divide, you know? Um, Internet still remains a pipe dream for most Botswana, you know? The technology is there, the cost of just the infrastructure in itself. Because with telecommunication companies, they have already broken even in putting the infrastructure, implementing the infrastructure after existing in Botswana for so many years. I think what Botswana, in my opinion, needs to move away from is from, I think at least what telecommunication companies in Botswana need to move away from is this idea that they need to maximize the most or squeeze the most out of their customers, you know. I think a bundle system should rather be introduced in Botswana, you know, where it shouldn't be a strange thing in Botswana, just like it isn't here in Tanzania, where for every amount of airtime that you buy, you get like some type of free data. Or worse yet, even if it's not just to get data by recharging, at least have really affordable bundles that can help people. Even if you're selling people a gig for $5 per day, trust me, if someone was spending, let's say, $20, right, for airtime, right, and they were getting 2 gigs for $20, the moment you give them 1 gig for $5, what's going to happen is that person who already had a high internet usage is going to have an even higher internet usage. They're going to subscribe to more, services. They're going to your internet appetite, if I should say, and your consumption becomes higher the more it becomes cheaper. So there's still money to be made. In fact, if not more money to be made, when people know that there's affordable internet, because they will always buy internet for Netflix. Because what happens now is this: there are not a lot of Netflix subscribers or streaming subscribers in general in Botswana because of the costly internet. But the moment internet becomes cheaper, people will refrain from watching Netflix just from their homes, which will not profit just internet service providers that offer broadband at home, but telecommunication providers, because people will now be watching Netflix on a combi somewhere, while chilling to get into a meeting, to go somewhere. So their internet usage will actually become higher as a result because it's cheaper. So they'll start doing more data consuming browsing, on the internet, which will make the telecommunications companies money. It's just that I don't think that the strategists in telecommunication in Botswana have actually realized that there is far more money to be made from moving away from this airtime model of buying internet and just making internet more accessible. And I don't have broadband here at home. I use about 3 gigs a day, And there was a time in my life where use 3 gigs a day on a phone was just unimaginable. But because data is so cheap here, I religiously recharge 3 gigs a day, which for Tanzania costs about $10, for 3 gigs a day. So I spend 10 pula every single day of my life to recharge, because those are my data needs and my data costs. And trust me, sometimes that 3 gigs, it ends after my Netflix binge or whatever, and I have to put in another one. So you see, there is money to be made for telecommunications companies. So I think it's a regulatory thing, but I also think it's a from a telecommunications standpoint. I just think the strategists are really lazy to think about ways to continue making money from their customers while giving them more. Because here's the thing, the argument is not that telecommunications shouldn't or can't make money. The issue is, if you're going to make money, at least give your customers more for the amount of money that you're making.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll just cut this into a short clip and send it to someone who works in the telecommunications industry or something. And to put my perspective into this as well, because it kind of affects me as a podcaster. I mean, not just the usual stuff about my internet speed and uploading and streaming and all that kind of stuff. But have you heard of the YouTube Partnership Program, the YPP?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so what this is that I'm sure you've seen a trend increasingly around the world that to say my profession is that I am a YouTuber, that's becoming increasingly acceptable. Like people, they don't have day jobs, they don't have careers like that, but they make basically YouTube videos on whatever topic they're interested in, and they upload on a regular basis, and based on the views they get a certain amount of money. So for this to happen, for you to be able to make money from YouTube, the first thing that needs to be in place is that the country you're in must basically have an infrastructure for the YPP, or otherwise YPP must be enabled in your country. So that basically means that if you reach a certain amount of subscribers and a certain amount of views per video, those views will be converted into US dollars or something. So basically you get money from the amount of views that you get. Now, this is not available in Botswana yet. I don't know if it's available in Tanzania and Zanzibar and those places. I know it's available in South Africa because I'm sure you can relate that whenever we want something in this side of the world, like Botswana, we're like, yeah, it's probably in South Africa because South Africa has all the things that we want and stuff like that. But interesting enough, Zimbabwe has the YPP, the YouTube Partnership Program. And I'm not dissing Zimbabwe, but I looked at it and I thought like, wait, how did Zimbabwe get it before us? Because like I said, I'm not dissing Zimbabwe, but that's kind of mind-boggling to me, being somewhat of a content creator here in Botswana, or trying to be one, that, yeah, how did they get it before? And Zimbabwe, I'm actually following some Zimbabwean podcasts, Tender Talks, for example. They have this culture of, I'm sure you've heard of Patreon, which is basically your like funding kind of platform. It's like people can pledge a certain amount of cash to you every month, or just a once-off donation to support your creative endeavors. They have this culture of producing dramas from Patreon. So forget about Zimbabwean National TV, whatever it's called. They just need enough funding, kickstarting a project on Patreon, and then they can produce this and put it on the internet so people can view it. They can even make that money back from the YouTube views that they get. So I thought that was really interesting that Zimbabwe has that sort of infrastructure and that culture of producing and encouraging more people to take their craft to the next level, because I'm sure that I don't have the best subscriber count, or I don't have the most amount of views, But definitely, if something like that existed, it opens up options for myself and options for a lot of people who are maybe not podcasters, but they're making skits and all that kind of stuff. Because you see, in a place like the States, for example, everyone's watching YouTube. So it makes sense that there's a huge chunk of people in the States who don't have day jobs, but they make enough to sustain themselves on YouTube because their video gets so many clicks and views in a day. Whereas in Botswana, if you look at even my schematics, most of my views are coming from Facebook Watch, and I've said this before. Facebook Watch is such a problematic uploader because it is so clunky to use. It doesn't upload properly, and I have to restart my upload so many times, as opposed to YouTube, where I can just have something even as long as this video, a video as long as 2 hours can get uploaded in less than 45 minutes even. But the same thing on Facebook Watch will take maybe 3 days of me leaving my laptop open. But most of my views are on Facebook Watch because, the bundles and everything, people are only logging into Facebook. YouTube is not covered in any of the bundles that we have, and therefore my audience in Botswana, by and large, is cut off from that platform of YouTube. So, yes, that's my perspective on this whole, this whole internet skedaddle in Botswana. I don't know if you had any thoughts about content creators and online and being a YouTuber as a career. I know that, well, it's definitely not traditional. It definitely hits a few heartstrings on the purist's heart, but what is your opinion about content creators as, those who take their content as a career?
Yeah, I have friends who are YouTubers here in Tanzania and content creators. So I definitely know that they do make money per view or whatever. So I take it that we probably do have like a YouTube partnership here in Tanzania where people can make money per views because we've got such a big internet community here, such a big YouTube community as well. So I think it would only make sense, even though I can't say for certain, but I think it would be an intelligent guess for me to say that we probably do. But I think, it goes directly back to you can't solve all the problems that you're saying right now without affordable and accessible internet. Without affordable and accessible internet, it's just not going to happen for a lot of creators. It's not even going to be an option for certain people because it's so inaccessible, you know. I think most Botswana youth can afford 10 pula a day. But what are they getting for 10 pula a day? They're getting far less than they could get, you know. Let's just use 10 pula as a base front, right? Because that's how much I get for 3 GB, and that's how much I pay for 3 GB. But let's put Tanzania. Let's take it that someone was even getting 1.5 Gs, yeah, GB in terms of like data per day. Let's take it someone was getting half of what I'm getting for $10 a day. I think it's all about accessibility to the infrastructure, for it to open up those types of. For us, we could only run an online tournament here in Tanzania because we're very confident that access to internet is not a problem here, So can you try to think how many people, if like it became a standard procedure in Botswana that internet is not expensive, you know, then people would know people are on internet, the same way where even though for you on Facebook it takes you forever to upload your podcasts, you still do it anyway. You know what I mean? Because you're like, listen, I know people are on Facebook. Despite our internet challenges in Botswana, people are on Facebook and people watch videos on Facebook. So the knowledge that something is there and is available is going to, prompt and push people towards producing more content, for those platforms. So I just think it's a question of access and affordability. And it's like a foundation standpoint. It's where everything else builds from.
Absolutely hit it on the head right there again. So, Brother Dominic, we are going almost towards an hour in terms of runtime. I know you had to go somewhere else, but before we sign off properly, you also had a couple of things that you wanted to throw my way. So bring it on. Let's go head to head for once in a debate I'm joking, but yeah, bring whatever you have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just for your listeners, how I met you, Master, was a couple of years ago at a debate tournament, and we got the chatting and conversing, and then you informed me that you were studying online, and I remember telling you at the time, and I have told you several times after that, I was considering taking an online degree because I myself did my A levels just through tutoring and homeschool, so to speak, which more or less is a form of correspondence learning, maybe just a little different, And I
Mm-hmm.
was I was like, my folks really came against the idea of me doing uni in that way. So I think it's a very interesting thing that you're about to graduate law, but you've been studying your entire law degree from online. Your first degree at that. That's not even like your like a lot of people decide to do their second degree online. You did your first degree online. So like tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Um, let's lay the groundwork first of all. So I'm a maverick. So I don't really think conventionally, and I think that's one of the things that's helped me in debating and public speaking as well, that I can get a point, for example, or not create a point, but I can see a point in a certain argument that people usually disregard, and then I can justify it in that light. And because it's such a novel argument, that impresses the judges more often than not. And yeah, that usually leads to me getting points, all right? So I'm a maverick, right? So I'm not someone who's conventional in any aspect of my life, whether it's the practice of my religion, whether it's the views that I hold and the things that I want to see in the world. I definitely shy away from the conventional road, the road that everyone goes through, right? Now, as to why I chose the University of London, which is the university that I used to, basically facilitate my study of law, the LLB, which is interesting enough, the same degree, exact same degree as Robert Mugabe and Nelson Mandela. Both of them have passed away now, but they did the exact same thing without internet when they were in prison, basically. And back then there was the post, and the post was the internet, if I can make a very bad comparison. But yeah. So why did I choose the University of London? Look, I had a lot of things going on for me, as in I had a lot of options, right? It wasn't just, oh, I just decided one day that I'm going to do it through the University of London. So I was planning, for example, to go to UCT, the University of Cape Town, and there were a couple of other places like Malaysia and yeah, plenty of places. I don't even remember all of them. Even if I'm not mistaken, UB might have been in the what do you call in the pipeline as well. I mean, I'm not one of those elitist people who thinks UB is crap. At least in the law department, UB is quite good. I know a lot of people who've graduated or are going to graduate from UB's law school who give me a run for my money. Not that I'm someone's that great, but I'm just saying that their level of education is pretty much on level with an English law degree. So that speaks volumes on its own. Ultimately, what made me choose the University of London after much thought, I'm going to kind of brush over or just disregard the personal stuff that was going on in my life at the time. But basically, my sister's also done the law degree from the University of London. She went on later to get an MBA, which is something definitely not related to law, but she works in ADR, which is alternative dispute resolution, so kind of legal, but she didn't, for example, bother to write her bar exams, and now that she's 3 decades old, so she kind of doesn't see a point in writing the bar exam because she's not even entirely sure that she wants to get into that lifestyle of being a full-time lawyer, that you go in the office at like 9, you come back home at 10 p.m. or something like that. She's not about that. So, but basically, she was the kind of last nail in the coffin that pushed me towards getting this degree online. How has it been? Well, let's say this. Not because it's bad or anything, but if I was given the option, I would probably have gone to a university looking back on it. Not because the education I received was bad or because of whatever reason. And I actually accept that because I took that path in life, I am where I am right now, where I'm even creating this podcast and meeting so many people online and getting to see humanity in its different forms and the beauty of humanity at that. But let's say it like this. So when you're studying online, there's no shortage of like actual content that you're supposed to consume because we even had an online library. So I had no shortage of books, and of course you've got Amazon and stuff like that to buy physical books and what have you. As for the actual like university experience, if I can put it like that, the thing of meeting new people online. Look, this podcast came at the end of my university career at that, but I started like going out of the house more when I was in university. And my hometown is Mahalape, but if you ask anyone around me, they will tell you how much I detest Mahalape. Okay, I hope I'm not stepping on people's shoes when I say that, but Mahalape is actually, I was born in Gabs. I don't know what I was going to say. I spent my childhood in Mahalape, but Palape is where I went to high school, and Palape is where I became a man. And I don't just mean, when I say man, I don't mean like, oh, because I've got these chromosomes and I've got things dangling between my legs, that makes me a man. I mean like actually having that mindset and maturing to become someone who is probably going to lead a household and hopefully other things as well. That all happened in Palape. So Palape holds a very special place to my heart. So I started going to Palape more. I became part of the Muslim Youth Committee in Palape. I started getting active with Muslim events in Gabs and all those kinds of things. And like how we met at that debate tournament, which was organized by Orate Africa. I don't know what I was doing there, to be honest. I think I was a mentor to the people from Kaswe. Like they were participating in that tournament as well. And I was just supposed to go there and spectate. But because I'd been interacting with Mokabo online prior to that, she knew who I was and she just handed me, I don't know, that marking sheet. And then I just got sucked into that world of like adjudicating debate and public speaking. And over these past years, I also joined the moot court, as in not as a mooter, but as an adjudicator once more, as a judge, because I have that background in law, so I know basically what's supposed to happen. And it was also during this time that I was scouted out by Zeus, we'll call him that. That's his code name at DWB. That's whom you like to call Sinwedi. So he scouted me out and I got a place at DWB as well. So I didn't lose out on the university experience per se because I was already doing so many things on the side. I was going to Palape mentoring debaters. I was active with the youth committee. This podcast was once upon a time a project that was supposed to be undertaken by the youth committee, but then it became my own personal thing. And I started getting more active in Gabs. I got to know myself more while I was doing this online degree. And I'd say that I know more about myself than I do of the actual law. So take that as you will, whether it's something good or bad. But I would definitely take it as a positive that I have found out where my place is in the world, or at least I hope. It's still a journey. I'm still uncovering things each and every day. And I hope that as time goes on, I can use these lessons that I've learned to help me find clarity and find the answers that I need. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
That's lovely. That's lovely. That's so interesting. I think there's a lot to learn from that. I think for me, if what I took from that is that you found yourself in the process, and I think it's better to find yourself first and find your law degree later than to find your law degree first and find yourself later. Because I think a lot of people only come to learn about themselves when they have been given tremendous amount of responsibility, already working and responsible for families and all of that stuff. Because life comes flooding at you very quickly when you start paying bills and you start earning money. That I think that it's always super important for you to know and understand yourself first. So kudos to you. I'm really happy and congratulations to you. I hope I'm looking forward to that text when you're officially been given your results. The final results as a law student.
Thank you very much, man. And if there's anyone in the viewers in the audience who's still kind of skeptical about this, I mean, when you're studying for a law degree, usually the end result is that you want to end up in a law firm, right? Well, when I went for my interview earlier this year, the reason why I haven't started yet is because of this pandemic, and I became a health risk, so they couldn't just take on a new recruit like that. But anyway, I did go. I'm going to keep something secret for now. I did go to a certain law firm earlier this year for an interview, and they were actually quite impressed with my CV, with the fact that at that time the podcast wasn't released, but I still put my podcast on the CV as well. And not a lot of people in Botswana have podcasts. I'm not saying that no one has it. I'm just saying it's kind of an extraordinary thing, and you can bear testimony to that as well. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that don't be afraid about putting yourself on your CV. Don't be afraid of putting things that you think are quirky, even putting that on your CV. And don't sell yourself this that, oh, because I've studied with an online degree, for example, I am somehow worth intrinsically less than someone who went to an actual university and studied there. Look, if you're going to bring that mentality to the interview, people are going to pick up on that, and then you'll be dealt your cards accordingly. And I'm not saying it's super easy or something. Life is still a struggle. Look, life is still a journey of us finding ourselves, and we need to be able to frame what we're trying to see. So if you're going to frame things in a positive light, then things will look positive. And I was reading a funny study the other day. Well, I say funny, but it's not actually funny, that the more you complain, the more it rewires your brain for actual negativity. So if there's I don't know, a neuroscientist or someone in the audience, they can elaborate more about that sort of stuff. But what I'm trying to say, people, is that we are individuals, and that should be our greatest strength, in my humble opinion. We shouldn't shy away from the things that make us ourselves. So I am not afraid of being a Muslim, for example, but at the same time, I know that I'm not a perfect fit into these Muslim communities around me. And I don't want to get too political here, because I reserve that for some special episodes. But yeah, I know that I'm a maverick, and that's my greatest strength. Instead of me trying to hide that and try to somehow fit into society, I've chosen that I'm different from the world. I don't perfectly fit in anywhere, but that's all right, because that's me. And that's the best I can give the world, so why not?
And we're back with a slightly different camera angle, and in my case, a slightly different outfit, because we got cut off and started recording after 1 week. We were just going to sign off anyway. So I just wanted to ask Brother Dominic what his final words were for the viewers, and also to thank him for coming on to the show twice now, because we had to record this episode in 2 sessions. So thank you once again for coming on. Like I mentioned to you on WhatsApp, I owe you a treat at Figo's whenever you come to Gabs next. And yeah, what are your final parting words for the viewers?
Listen, I'll hold you to that treat at Figo.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
what I just wanted to say is, firstly, thanks, Mosta, for having me on the podcast. It was a very interesting conversation. But as a parting words to the viewers, what I would say, or the listeners rather, what I would say is this: if you want to be different, you have to think different. If you want new and different outcomes, which most people do want, I think you need to engage in a set of different activities. I say this from personal experience, because I remember I always wanted very different things from other people. And I took an extraordinary path for me to reach there. So I think you just need the bravery to think different if you want to be different. Because a lot of people, they want different things while thinking like everybody else, you know? And there tends to be a lot of the frustration with people, is that they want to make a difference, they want to do something different, but then they're following the very same track that everybody is following, and the very same mindset and everything. So if you want to do different, think different. That would be those would be my parting words.
Excellent. And also being proud of the fact that you are different, because I gave an example recently about, I was talking about the blessings of community, and I mentioned that you cannot have a community without individuals. And you need to know, as an individual, where do you fit in the community. For example, you've got a car which has got the engine, it's got the steering wheel, it's got the pedals. Those are three fundamentally different parts of the car. Even structurally, they are different,
but they are all fundamental to the process of actually operating that car. And you can't replace one with the other. You can't put the steering wheel where the engine is supposed to be. So our job should be finding out or figuring out where our piece is or where we fit in into this jigsaw called the world. And if it's a place that no one else has ever bothered to go to, then there's nothing to be ashamed about. Rather, we should be proud that we are taking that step and we are making the world a better place in that regard. So once again, Dominic, thank you for coming on to our show. I hope that as time, I hope as time progresses, we get to see more of you, not only on this show, but on the global scale of debating and everything else that we've got lined up. So once again, thank you for coming on, and I hope you have a great day and the great rest of your weekend.
Thank you so much, Master.
Anytime, anytime. All right, dear viewers, so this is the official end, dear listeners. So thank you for sticking with us. Thank you for dealing with different camera angles and different outfits. It's a thing that happens, but if you're listening to this on the audio version, well, you probably wouldn't have noticed unless I told you, but it is what it is. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you learned it. Check out TCRO on all its social media platforms. I'll link them down below. By the way, Dominic, are there any other platforms besides TCRO that you want the viewers to know? I don't know, maybe you have a private YouTube channel somewhere about you being an idol or something.
Oh, no.
Alright, so it's just
I haven't started vlogging or anything like that, so it's mostly just the work we do at TCRO.
okay. So I'll be sure to link all the TCRO socials down below. Do you have a dedicated website yet, or you're still working on that?
That dedicated website will be up probably sometime next month. But like for those who are interested, maybe you could go and follow me on Instagram. Instagram is at Yebula, which is at YEBULA, and then Facebook is Dominic Fwamba. So, I mean, for those who are interested, anyway, I'm not a very interesting person on social media, but that's if you want to follow.
Well, you heard it, viewers. You know what to do. Smash those like buttons, leave your comments down below, and follow us, the Scholar and the Student. Follow Dominic on all his platforms, especially TCRO. We hope you enjoyed and that you learned something. Until next time, peace out. Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, wa alaikum salam.